Primarch who bleeds for humanity doesn't abandon it. So ask yourself, why did the most human of all the Primarchs vanish into the void and never look back? Welcome, Initiate. The Imperium calls it a sacrifice. The Salamanders call it a prophecy. We call it what it is, a deliberate disappearance. And this is the story of why the 18th's father didn't get lost. He executed an escape. Not from the enemy, but from the Imperium itself. To understand why a Primarch would excise himself from the very Imperium he hammered into existence, we need to read the evidence buried beneath the official account. Unlike his brothers, Vulkan wasn't sculpted by kings or shaped by warlords. He fell from the sky onto Nocturne, a death world that grinds life into ash, and was raised a blacksmith in a village that shouldn't have survived. You know it, common people with calloused hands. When the Emperor finally surfaced to claim him, the contest he devised wasn't a measure of strength alone, it was a vivisection of character. After a hunt that tested everything both men were made of, the Emperor, disguised as nothing more than a stranger, surrendered his own victory to pull Vulkan from the jaws of death. In that moment, Vulkan didn't kneel to a conqueror. He knelt to a man who proved a single life outweighed his own pride. What a beautiful bond between father and son. If only he had something like that with every Primarch, you wouldn't had a civil war, you fuck. When he took command of the 18th Legion, he gave them more than a name. He gave them a doctrine that contradicted the entire ideological architecture of the Great Crusade. The Promethean Creed, absolute self-sacrifice and the protection of human life as the supreme tactical objective. While his brothers calculated acceptable losses, the Salamanders treated civilians as the mission itself, not the collateral surrounding it. And that made Vulkan dangerous, not to Xenos or heretics, but to the Imperium's fundamental operating principle. He argued with his brothers over body counts. He questioned the theology of victory, what it cost, who paid the tithe, and whether the mathematics ever actually balanced. He was a craftsman who understood that creation is infinitely more difficult than destruction. This was never a personality quirk. It was a standing dissent. It was also a warning. Because a Primarch who thinks like that, who values a single life over a strategic objective, was never going to survive what came next with his convictions intact. The Horus Heresy wasn't a war for Vulkan. It was a dissection chamber. At the Dropsite Massacre on Istvan V, he stood ready to drag Horus to the floor of history. The betrayal detonated without warning. The Iron Warriors opened the atomics, and the Salamanders' Legion was reduced to ash and molecular memory in a single, catastrophic moment. But Vulkan couldn't die. As a perpetual, his body rebuilt itself, each time pulling him back from the void, only to deposit him into the same cell. The same hands with the same voice, his own brother Conrad CURZE, the Night Haunter. What followed wasn't torture in any conventional architecture. It was a philosophical interrogation conducted with blades. But it wasn't the torture that broke him. It was what the torture revealed. Because CURZE didn't want to destroy Vulkan's body, he wanted to destroy Vulkan's argument. And the most terrifying possibility, the one the high archives of Terra sealed and classified, is that he might have succeeded. CURZE had one thesis, that beneath the compassion, beneath the Promethean Creed and the Forge philosophy and the careful hands, Vulkan was a weapon, identical to him, just with a better paint. He beheaded Vulkan, ripped his hearts out, tore him apart at the molecular level, and watched him reassemble, screaming. But the physical methodology was secondary. The real instrument was psychological, surgical, precise, and patient. He forced Vulkan to watch innocents die, their faces memorized, their names eventually lost. He trapped him inside a battle automata, encased in iron, his own mind piloting a killing machine, and forced him to slaughter loyalists with his own hands. Vulkan's answer was to turn the weapons on himself, to destroy the shell rather than continue the rampage. So ask yourself, how many times can a man die before there's nothing left worth resurrecting? What surfaced from that cell wasn't the same Vulkan. The cruelty had carved channels into his psyche that would never scar over. He had been forced to witness what a Primarch truly was at the foundational level, a misery engine wrapped in mythology. And the reflection CURZE held up to him, the one he could not look away from, was close enough to accurate to be devastating. That's the version they archived on Terra, sealed, sanctioned, and filed under tragedy. But what the official record refuses to examine is what that story implies. Millennia passed. The Imperium, fracturing at every joint during the War of the Beast, came crawling. They located Vulkan living in voluntary exile and delivered their plea. A wah of such catastrophic scale it had already scarred Terra's orbit. Reluctantly, he answered the call. But this wasn't the Forge Father of old, the architect of the Promethean Creed, the builder who argued for every civilian life. This was a being who had witnessed the terminal mathematics of what Primarchs actually produce. He allowed himself to be aimed one final time. In the concluding engagement, he faced the Prime Orc, 10 meters of biological horror compressed into something that shouldn't be able to exist, and made his choice. He wrapped his arms around it and drove them both into an energy generator. Both entities ceased to exist as coherent matter. Missing in action, believed dead, believed. This was not a sacrifice born from the heat of combat. This was a calculated disappearance executed under optimal cover conditions. He used the chaos, the smoke, the grief, and the desperation of that war as the perfect architecture for a final exit. He walked away, not from his legion alone, but from the entire ontology of being a Primarch. This is where the theory calcifies into something that demands an answer. His sons, the Salamanders, have built their entire spiritual framework around 9 artifacts he scattered across the galaxy. The belief is foundational. When all 9 are recovered, Vulkan returns. The exile ends, the father comes home. But that belief contradicts the man at every level. Before Istvan V, before CURZE, before the heresy incinerated everything he built, Vulkan had already ordered the destruction of his most powerful creations. He watched them broken and smelted because he understood what weapons of that magnitude invited when they fell into the wrong hands. He didn't archive them, he executed them. So why would a man with that operational philosophy construct a galaxy-spanning navigation system pointing directly at his own location? He wouldn't. The 9 artifacts aren't a breadcrumb trail. They're 9 locks on a cage of his own design. He wasn't constructing a path toward him, he was engineering a trial. Each artifact deliberately obscured, deliberately scattered, designed to make the prophecy almost impossible to fulfill. Not as a simple test of worthiness, but as a philosophical filter, to ensure that whatever force finally reaches him has spent long enough in the pursuit to understand, not just find, why he left. It is the ultimate failsafe, a self-imposed edict of obliteration, applied to the most dangerous weapon in the Salamander's armory, Vulkan himself. Vulkan is alive. Not adrift in the warp, not regenerating in a stasis crypt beneath the Fang or the Palace. He is out there, embedded in the uncountable billions. A nameless smith in a Hab district with calloused hands and eyes that have watched civilizations reduce themselves to cinders. A cloaked figure who materializes when a family is trapped beneath a collapsing bulkhead, and is gone before anyone thinks to ask his name. The Illuminati Broadcast Network doesn't tell you what to believe, but the question this transmission cannot close is this. Is a Primarch who refuses to return because he cares too much the greatest act of love in the Imperium's history? Or is it the most damning indictment ever written into the history of mankind? Vulkan Report is closed. Hope you liked it, and thanks for watching.